The rural way of life is about making everyone feel at home. Tractor Supply chose advanced 5G solutions from T-Mobile for Business to transform intelligent customer service. Together, we put the power of AI to work across 2,200 stores, keeping things running seamlessly inside, curbside, and countryside. This is elevated customer experience. This is Tractor Supply with T-Mobile for Business. Take your business further at T-Mobile.com/now.
This is Let the Record Show, using common sense. Now, here are your hosts, Judge Richard Weinberg and Chairman Jesse Garcia.
Welcome back to Let the Record Show. This is Judge Richard Weinberg. With me is my distinguished colleague, co-host, Jesse Garcia. Jesse is the vice chair of the Republican Party statewide here in New York, as well as the county chair of the Suffolk County Party. Joining us once again is our favorite guest, Eric Levin, noted attorney, commentator, and essayist. Gentlemen, you left me alone last week, but I was fortunate enough to commandeer Curtis Sleewer into the studio. But I welcome you, gentlemen, back. It's nice to have the triumvirate working again together.
Good to be here.
My pleasure, Your Honor.
So, today is Wednesday, even though this show will first be heard on Sunday. Tomorrow night is the first presidential debate. It's one of two presidential debates. It's what's interesting from my perspective about this is that this is before either one of these gentlemen, Biden or Trump, is official nominee of the party. Even though they're presumptive nominees, neither one has been officially designated by their party as the candidate for November. And what happened was Biden made a gambit. I guess he looked at the polls and was concerned about how he was doing and the reception he was getting, both personally and on the issues. And somebody must have said to him, you got to get out there and show energy and toughness and aggressiveness, and you're on top of your game and you're serving America, and et cetera, because that's what political advisors do. So he challenged Trump to a debate, and that was interesting because for the longest part of this campaign year, he's been ignoring those demands and was acting like he wasn't going to debate Trump. And Trump has been pushing for it, and Trump jumped. Now, in my not-so-humble opinion, I think the scenario is set against Trump because at CNN, you have two so-called moderators, both of whom, Bash and Tapper, both of whom are on the record, on tape, being very, very hostile to Donald Trump. You have a network that's hostile to Donald Trump. And if I were, and by the way, they can't interrupt each other. They get cut off on the mic. So you're really not having a debate. You can have like a question and then a response. So I don't know if it's the best forum in the world for Trump. Maybe it'll stop him from saying something silly. So my take on this, and I'll turn it over to you, gentlemen, is as simple as this. Debates, I do not believe in the usual course of history, turn elections around. I do not believe they do. I think in this case, this may be the exception to that rule. If Biden implodes and shows that he doesn't have the mental capacity or doesn't have the ability to expound on his record and show why he's been good for America for the last 3.5 years, I think that he's in serious trouble. Similarly, while I expect Biden may implode, I have to worry about Trump exploding. And if I'm Trump and I'm advisor to Trump, I'm saying, keep your cool. Don't go for the debate. You have a great record to run on. Biden has a terrible record to run on. Just point out the successes of your 4 years as opposed to the failures of his 3.5 years, and let the record be very clear what's better for America in the 4 years coming. Jesse, what do you say?
Well, Your Honor, I think you're right. The taping of this show, we're about less than 24 hours from the debate. And I think that anybody from a political point of view or a strategy point of view has seen something being demonstrated here, at least it has been for me. The lowering of expectations by the Biden team on his performance, it's to the point where the fact that if he can survive and stand and stay stay on stage for 90 minutes of this debate, that's going to be declared a victory for him and stave off all the issues involving his acuity and his ability, his cognitive functions and such. We've been hearing all of these discussions, 16, separate team members preparing the president for this debate, hunkered down in debate camp in Delaware, and he's going to be getting well rested and well prepared for the debate. It almost reminds me like they took a sheet out of one of the West Wing debate episodes from that storied.
Why do you think they didn't? Why don't you think that? It's all theater anyway. Everything that's run has a Hollywood angle.
Exactly. It is a Hollywood angle. So I think what's going to be interesting is I think the one problem with this debate is Donald Trump is one of the best counterpunchers there is in recent times. I do believe that, though, these debates, which typically get more eyes on them, as many eyes of them as they do like just under a Super Bowl, I think people are going to be watching these. They're going to be setting the tone, as you pointed out. The issue is, though, I do think debates do make a change. In 1980, the Carter administration, staved off debates, and they finally agreed to one, I believe about a little bit more than a week before the 1980 election. And that there, I believe, even though a landslide was brewing, I think it confirmed the landslide with Donald Trump. With Ronald Reagan, clearly defining his vision for America in the shining city on the hill. Again, I think that in '84 it helped Ronald Reagan.
Those are Freudian slips I've ever heard of.
I know.
I would take Ronald Reagan in a heartbeat over anyone.
Listen, if you're going to have a dead guy as president, far better Reagan than Biden. Go ahead.
This is true. Well, Ronald Reagan is the first president I ever voted for and my favorite president.
My favorite president, too, by the way.
It's always in the forefront, and his approach and philosophy is always in the forefront of my mind. So that Freudian slip is, to be expected. But it'll be interesting. The fallout here, both men have a lot at stake here, a lot to lose here, but they have a lot to gain. I believe that Donald Trump is the same measured individual that he was after the verdict in New York in that sham trial, immediately thereafter, and the press conference that occurred afterwards, the day after. This is going to be successful for him. I'm going to steal part of Eric Levin's line. I think the president has a very, very simple message to do. Are you better off than you were 4 years ago when I was president? And now to steal Eric's line, based on what happened 4 years ago, my policies versus the policies on taxation, national security, the border, the economy, jobs, energy independence, who is better prepared and has the better record for the next 4 years of America? And this is going to be a tantamount election, but I do believe that the future is in the balance here of the direction of America.
I agree with that. Eric?
I agree with much of what you guys are saying. Clearly, Jesse, to your point, quoting a very wise man, the question is for Trump.
You or Reagan?
Well, both. Yeah, the question, of course, is Trump should focus on, are you better off today than you were 4 years ago? And Richard, to your point about the microphones, I happen to think it's actually in Trump's benefit that the microphones are turned off. Because if we remember the debate in 2020, Trump wouldn't let Biden say anything. He kept cutting him off. Biden was on the verge repeatedly of saying something incredibly stupid and inane, and Trump saved him by cutting him off.
Agreed.
So if the microphone is off and Biden is forced to speak and fill the time, that actually cuts against him, because that's when he starts to mumble, that's when he starts to ramble, that's when he starts to become incoherent.
And also he doesn't have notes or a teleprompter.
And doesn't have notes and a teleprompter. So ironically, it may actually cut in Trump's favor, because Trump's problem in large part is impulse control. So if the microphone is off, even if the impulse overtakes him, no one can hear him. So I think that to that point, it may cut in Trump's favor. Clearly what Biden is going to do, you are going to hear the term January 6th no fewer than 7,842 times. Biden is just going to talk about January 6th. He's going to say Donald Trump, the convicted felon, or convicted felon Donald Trump, or Trump the felon.
Don't forget abortion.
Well, we'll get to that, but they will come to abortion. And then, of course, he's also going to point out how Trump foolishly said that he's going to pardon the hostages, quote unquote, who are the people that stormed the Capitol and assaulted police on the Hill. And that's going to be the focus of Biden's attack at the debate, I believe. And to the extent he deals with any issue, it will be abortion. He's just going to talk about abortion. Donald Trump appointed the judges that overturned Roe v. Wade. Donald Trump is the reason for Dobbs. Now, Trump, in a measured way, and that may be oxymoronic, should be able to say, all we did was say that the decision on abortion goes to the states, and it's up to each state to decide. Now, he has said that that's his position, but he needs to be able to fall back on that and then move on. Make the point, it's up to the states, and then move on. If he starts trying to justify and rationalize and discuss and explaining, once you're explaining, as we know, you are losing. And if he starts defending the actions on January 6th, if he starts defending the hostages, the so-called hostages, and if he starts talking about a stolen election in 2020, Trump will lose the debate. And if Trump loses the debate, ultimately he will probably lose the election. Now, Jesse, to your point, I happen to agree with you. There's an incredible amount for Biden to lose. People are watching Biden not so much to hear what he stands for. People know what he stands for. He is a radical progressive. He may say he's a moderate, but he is governing as a radical progressive, and people understand what the impact of those policies have been on them. What they are going to be focusing on is whether or not he's a cognitively impaired octogenarian imbecile. And if he confirms that he is, then he will lose. If he's able to persuade people that he's able to stand on a world stage and act coherently, then he has done himself a lot of good. But coming back to the original point, if Trump allows Biden to speak, I think Biden will be his own undoing.
Let me give you a slightly different take on what's at stake at this debate. The Biden strategy is going to be to bait Trump and get him into a hole, have him lose his cool. Okay. Now, one of the things that's very problematic here, and I'll say again, I've said this a number of times in Katz and Cosby to such learned scholars as Alan Dershowitz and Greg Jarrett and Andy McCarthy, but I'll say it again here. The conviction, the 34 felony convictions coming out of
that's going to be a
Alvin
huge point.
Bragg.
That's going to be a huge point.
And they're going to, you say you're a felon, you've been convicted, you can't be trusted, character, you're a felon, you've been convicted. Okay. Now, there's a gag order, and the gag order was just modified. And as Dershowitz said to us last night on Katz and Cosby, it's too little, too late. What did Alan mean by that? The fact of the matter is he shouldn't have been gagged at all, because this is a presidential campaign. He has a First Amendment right to speak as a candidate, and the people also have a First Amendment right to hear. So that's just wrong. It was wrong for Mershon to do it. He's just modified it. So what is the modification? It says, well, you can attack the witnesses against you or attack the jury pool, but not individual jurors. Again, too little, too late. So my advice, and this is, people say, well, but you're a judge, you're a Supreme Court justice, how can you say this? I would say that this is an unconstitutional prior restraint. And if I'm Donald Trump, I would say, listen, I want to be very, very clear. These charges against me were false. They were politically motivated. I didn't have a fair jury panel because 85% of the folks in Manhattan voted for the other guy. I had a prosecutor who campaigned against the other candidate by saying, I'm going to go after Trump. I had a judge who ruled against me consistently. I didn't have a fair trial. This was a kangaroo court. This was 34 convictions on something that never should have gone to trial, and this judge should never preside over. And I would do that. And people said to me, well, isn't he risking contempt? And my answer is good. Because by saying, he has to say,
absolutely.
If he's held in contempt, it proves his point.
That's true, exactly. You need to get out there and get in front of it, and not do it with an arm tied behind you. You have to say, this was a kangaroo court, kangaroo DA, kangaroo judge. All the rulings were against me. He should have recused himself. The venue should have been
The case should never have been brought.
And never been brought. And say it over and over again Don't convict me based on a trumped-up kangaroo court. Vote for me on the merits. Don't vote for me on the merits. But please, in fairness to the American people, you have a right to be heard what my policies are. Eric.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. I mean, that's a very good point. Biden will undoubtedly talk about the convictions, and I think Donald Trump should address it head on by basically saying the case should never have been brought. It was an homage to Joseph Stalin. Prosecute. You show me the man. I'll show you the crime. And they weaponize the criminal justice system. It's a two-tier criminal justice system, and I leave it to the American people to make their own decision and then move on.
Right, Jesse. Final word for this segment.
Final word is I think there would be a series of hundreds, if not thousands, of average Americans that would more than likely love to pay and contribute to pay for that fine from the contempt of court, from the contempt charges that may come forward. Because you know what? This president and this candidate and this former president needs to defend his records and identify exactly what that court was, as you guys described it. A sham, a kangaroo court, a partisan attempt to stop a political opponent that we have not seen in this country ever, except in countries such as Russia and Iran and others.
I agree. Let the record show. I'm Judge Richard Weinberg. With me is Chairman Jesse Garcia of the Republican Party and noted commentator, essayist, and attorney Eric Levin. Please stay with us. We'll be back in a moment with more interesting conversation.
Let the Record Show is on the air.
Get ready for Universal Epic Universe, featuring the wizarding world of Harry Potter, Ministry of Magic, and Super Nintendo World. Now open at Universal Orlando Resort. Tickets and packages on sale now at universalorlando.com.
Tell Me What Happened is a podcast that asks, what would you do if you saw someone needing help?
This tree comes crashing through the roof of my vehicle, and I said, I don't know if I'm going to make it.
Listen to the true stories of people who choose to save a stranger on Tell Me What Happened.
Shopping is hard, right? But I found a better way. Stitch Fix online personal styling makes it easy. I just give my stylist my size, style, and budget preferences. I order boxes when I want and how I want. No subscription required. And he sends just for me pieces, plus outfit recommendations and styling tips. I keep what works and send back the rest. It's so easy. Make style easy. Get started today at stitchfix.com/Spotify. That's stitchfix.com/Spotify.
Build professional skills this semester with Adobe Creative Cloud and create standout work both in and out of the classroom. Save big on professional creativity tools. Students get 65% off Adobe Creative Cloud, including Photoshop, Illustrator, Premiere Pro, Acrobat Pro, and 20+ creative apps. No matter what project you're working on, Adobe Creative Cloud apps can help you take it to the next level. Visit adobe.com/student to learn more.
This is Let the Record Show. Now, here are your hosts, Judge Richard Weinberg and Suffolk County Republican Committee Chairman Jesse Garcia.
We're back on Let the Record Show with Chairman Jesse Garcia of the Republican Party, distinguished attorney, commentator, and essayist Eric Levin. I'm Judge Richard Weinberg. Gentlemen, I want to shift gears. I want to talk to you about Trump's vice presidential pick and why that is so important. So, let me tell you why I think it's important. In the ordinary, this is kind of an exceptional election, gentlemen. I started off the conversation today by saying generally debates don't matter that much and it doesn't turn an election around. Now I will say to you another truism, which may not be true this time around, the vice presidential pick. I think it's very, very important that Donald Trump pick the right man or woman for that position. Why? Because if you are voting for Joe Biden, as Nikki Haley correctly pointed out, you're voting for Kamala Harris. And if you're voting for Kamala Harris, God help this country. If you think we're in trouble now with 3.5 years of Biden-Harris and super annual examples of crazy Sanders and Elizabeth Warren politics and policy governing the Democratic Party, just imagine Biden's gone for one way or another, but by death, by inability, by resignation, and Kamala Harris is your president. A raging mediocrity, nothing but an identity politics candidate picked because of her sex and her ethnicity, has accomplished nothing except revealing that she is a raging mediocrity in 3.5 years. And I think the idea of having her as our president is frightening indeed. Now, that's my take on that. The vice presidency means something this time. Now, the brilliance of Trump 4 years ago in getting Pence, when people had doubts about his temperament or his judgment, he picked a distinguished former congressman, a governor, a temperate gentleman named Pence. And Pence was a grown-up in the room. And
he also brought evangelicals along with him.
Right. And he was perceived as being a grown-up in the room. So I submit to you, it's very, very important that the pick that Trump makes is somebody who's ready, willing, and able. God forbid there's a death or resignation or disability, and Trump is not the president, if elected, to go in, fulfill the job, and protect and defend America's interest and the American people. So therefore, that choice is very, very important in reassuring the American people. Now, there's been a short list, and people keep hoping against hope that Nikki Haley will be pulled out, but she hasn't been vetted, and I don't think that's realistic. Other names floating around are Senator Tim Scott. Others are Senator Marco Rubio.
Bill Haggerty.
Haggerty, by the way, would be a good choice.
Bill Haggerty would be a spectacular choice.
Yeah, in fact, and Eric and I both know Haggerty.
He's a spectacular guy.
Spectacular
an
guy.
Incredible talent. Yes.
An ambassador, U.S. senator, knows foreign policies, national security. He's a businessman. He's absolutely would be a great choice. But he hasn't been really in that mix.
Doug Burgum, who has been in the mix.
Well, now, Doug Burgum, who I know, and in fact was with us in Katz and Cosby last Friday, was in the studio with us and sat next to me, and I've met about 5 or 6 times and spent extended periods of time with him. He is absolutely an extraordinary guy. He's smart. He's measured. He's a successful businessman. He knows energy policy, which is a very big issue. He knows national security.
He's a governor.
So I think a governor is a good choice. So I'm very hopeful that he'll be in that mix. Now, a wild card in this is Governor Youngkin of Virginia. And if they pick Youngkin of Virginia, who's also a very solid businessman, temperate, a grown-up in the room, national security, energy, economics, he knows it as well. And, of course, the debate is going to be in Virginia, and he'll be at the debate. If he pulled him out of the hat, I would be fine with Governor Youngkin as well. So I turn it over to Jesse first, because I understand that Eric has very strong feelings about one of the candidates, who I did not mention, by the way. Jesse, your turn.
Yeah, thank you. I guess you're right. I mean, we've heard the same names over and over again. Youngkin is a new name. We've heard the Rubios, the Vances, the Governor Burgum, Scotts, and New York Stefanik. I think that one of the things you said, judges, you're right. The first decision that any presidential candidate has to make is who is best prepared to be president in the event that they are incapacitated or they pass on. So that's, I believe, that Donald Trump has demonstrated that ability far better than President Biden did when he selected Kamala Harris to check the boxes off on a number of demographics for his left-wing progressives. Pence was the adult in the room and brought something to the table. Did not bring everything on the electoral map, though, if you look at this. And I believe that we've seen that the electoral map is not going to be big of an issue here. I also think that the candidates that for some reason, I will tell you that Youngkin and Burgum, for me, are attractive candidates. Like, as you both said, they're both governors. They both are executives on the municipal side. In the case of Burgum, he also brings the ability of he's very tied to donors in the energy industry and in big tech, where we've seen an increase in participation and support for Donald Trump over the last several weeks. I believe he went through Silicon Valley or down in California and swooped in with about $55 million in donations. So it's going to be interesting to see what the presidential candidate is going to be. Now, for me, being a Cuban American, Marco Rubio is always very close to my heart. And I think that before as you look at these possible vice presidential candidates, where they come from is important too. If you pick a Vance, or if you pick a senator of any type or Rubio, you have to make sure that there's a Republican governor there that's going to appoint someone that's going to join that caucus and once the vacancy is created. But it's going to be one of the interesting things, and I do hope that the president, Donald Trump, who's a showman, he utilizes timing here on the best maximum benefit for this campaign.
Well, that would be that's why I think if he revealed who his vice presidential candidate was during the debate, that would turn the whole discussion and debate around, and you have the best possible audience. This will probably be the one debate that even beats the Super Bowl ratings in terms of audience viewing. So I'm very strong. I like that idea of him actually announcing that, whether it's true or not, or it's just noise in the system to get attention. I don't know. By the way, I just want to make this comment, then I'll turn it over to Eric. Both Eric better than I, but both Eric and I know Senator Rubio, and we both think the world of him. The problem with him is twofold.
Well, this is your view now. From this point forward, we share the first part.
Yeah, right. But we both think he's absolutely
technical. I think there's a technical situation here where we can get through.
He'll have to resign and leave Florida.
He has to, or Trump can move to his golf course in Jersey. That's up to him. I hate to see Rubio have to leave the Senate, but if he lost it, if that happened, I'm not a big fan of increasing the majority of the Senate in the hands of. The question is, if they got elected, when does he have to resign?
I don't know the answer to that.
I think before the Electoral College.
And I'm not a lawyer, but I mean, obviously, with elections and these type of campaigns, you always look at the legalities of these things. It's my understanding that as long as he resigns before
the Electoral College,
before the Electoral College sits,
January 6th,
between Election Day, and he owns a home, I believe, in the Washington, D.C. area that he could register to, I believe that would be in compliance with all the constitutional laws and regulations.
Okay. All right. I have Eric sitting here because there's one candidate whose name I did not mention, but Eric wants to be heard on this name that's floated around.
Yeah. So first, let me just say that one of the main reasons why this pick is so critically important for Trump is because I think it will indicate to the country the direction he wants to take the country. If he picks any of Tim Scott, who happened to have been my very first choice for president before I moved to Nikki Haley, or Marco Rubio, who was my choice in 2016, or Bill Hagerty, who's a personal friend and an enormously talented guy, or Doug Burgum, who I think would be a fine vice president, and he would be under the category of the do no harm. I think he would be indicating to the American voter that he wants to take America forward. He doesn't want to look back; he wants to look forward. But the one name that keeps popping up on the really short list that I find enormously disturbing is Senator J.D. Vance of Ohio, because J.D. Vance, as I understand it, one of the primary reasons, if not the sole reason, that he's on the really short list is because Donnie Jr. thinks he likes the way he punches back, likes the way he fights. He's all about MAGA world. He's all about revenge. He's all about rehashing the 2020 election. But J.D. Vance brings, in addition to, he's the one candidate who is either not a plus. Tim Scott, Marco Rubio both bring demographic groups, African Americans and Hispanic Americans respectively, from moderates to Republicans, or Democrats to independents, to who may ultimately vote Republican. J.D. Vance actually pushes people away. And why? We should remember that J.D. Vance is an isolationist. If we have learned nothing in the last 3 years, isolationism and retreat from the world is absolutely the wrong way to go. I invite every listener to play for themselves, to look up. It's very easy to find. Ronald Reagan's address at Normandy, the 40th anniversary at Pointe du Hoc, where he talks about the importance of America's role abroad. And he calls out directly, expressly, the dangers of isolationism and how that policy alone brings us into world wars. And that when America retreats, bad actors fill the vacuum. J.D. Vance advocates for bringing America home. He is a classic isolationist, and that is bad for America. The second problem with J.D. Vance is, let's remember who people are judged by the company they keep. Who is his primary surrogate his principal surrogate during the primary in Ohio, Marjorie Taylor Greene. Marjorie Taylor Greene. This is a horrible person. These are the kinds of people we want out of the party, not brought closer into the party. When Marjorie Taylor Greene was advocating for him as a
Senate
candidate, she actually went to a convention sponsored by Nick Fuentes. Nick Fuentes is a well-known Nazi, and she went to a Nazi rally and spoke there, and then came back and campaigned for J.D. Vance. When J.D. Vance was told about this, and it's an open question whether or not she was going or not, whether he knew she was going or not, he said, she did nothing wrong, she's a friend of mine, and he continued to have her act as a surrogate for him. If you don't think that advertisement is already in the can for Democrats, if he becomes the vice presidential candidate, you are sleeping. You are wrong. The fact that he has associated himself so closely with Marjorie Taylor Greene is going to be a big impediment for J.D. Vance. He's going to be a negative on the ticket. But let's also remember, in terms of vote getting, in 2020, when he won, in 2022, when he won, Governor DeWine, a Republican governor, won by 23 points. 23. Huge landslide. J.D. Vance won by 6. That means 17% of the Ohio electorate went out of their way to vote for a Republican governor candidate, and then went down ballot and intentionally then crossed party lines to vote for a Democratic Senate candidate. So J.D. Vance is wrong on policy. He's bad for America. He's wrong on the company he keeps, and he doesn't get votes. He's a huge negative. Trump helps himself by picking of any number of wonderful candidates on the Republican bench. The one candidate, the one Veep nominee that he can pick that tanks his election is J.D. Vance.
Jesse, final thoughts for this segment.
I think that, honestly, I really don't. I agree with Eric. I don't believe it's going to be Vance. I think that it's a bit of just a showmanship and friendship that's his name is being thrown into this mix. Also, maybe as a check and to the base. But I do believe that of the candidates that we've been discussing, the two governors, the two, Marco Rubio, Tim Scott, I believe that, Trump is going to send a very clear message that the policies he is going or should be debating on and advancing and reminding the American voters is that once he gets back in office with a Congress that will be helpful and wants to move forward as it was during his first 2 years of presidency, that person, even though they will face the presidential primary, will carry on that legacy of those policies.
I think that's a very, very good point. By the way, I've met Vance. He was perfectly pleasant when I've met him. But let's also point out, how long is he in the United States Senate? What did he do before that?
Too long.
No. But hold on. I'm serious. I'm talking about somebody who's qualified to be president of the United States, to pick up. We've had one person who's totally inexperienced. The difference between Vance, by the way, and Kamala Harris is Vance, for whatever his flaws, happens to be a smart guy. He's not a lightweight intellectually. I think he's wrong on certain issues, and I agree with Eric about the isolationism. It gives me an incredible pause about him. I also believe that Jesse's right. I think he's there to placate the base and show he's under consideration. I don't believe he will be the candidate. Also, let me just say this, Jesse, and you understand this better than Eric or I do. It's all about the electoral map. You're already going to win Ohio if you're Trump. You don't need him to win Ohio.
Well, plus whatever the Vance supporters are Trump supporters. These aren't people under any circumstance will vote for anyone other than Trump.
Final word, Jesse, and we have to take the break.
I think that you're right. I do think the electoral map, in the case of Donald Trump, as he's demonstrated this during his first presidential run, really had nothing to be in there. I mean, Indiana was already banked for the Republicans. We had Pence. I think it was his skill set that was important. I believe that you will be seeing that same type of philosophy and approach. The skill sets, what they bring to the table, executive experience, support amongst industries and donor groups. That's why the Youngston name is very interesting. That's the one play where I believe
Youngkins?
that
Youngkins? Or did you say Youngkins?
I'm sorry. Yes.
I was going to say, talk about pulling a rabbit out of the hat. Yeah. You got some guy who've never heard
Youngston.
of. That's right.
There you go. A novice.
I apologize.
That's okay.
For Virginia, because we know that Virginia is going to be in play again, and there's an emphasis on Virginia.
No, I think that's what would be an incredible.
He can't seek re-election again.
Yeah, it's one of the dumbest. The only state in the entire country, Jesse and Eric, where 10 minutes after you're sworn in, you're going to
You're a lame duck.
You go to your celebratory luncheon after you've been sworn in as governor. You're a lame duck in 10 minutes. All right, this is Let the Record Show with Chairman Jesse Garcia, the Republican Party, Eric Levin, noted attorney, commentator, and essayist. I'm Judge Richard Weinberg. Please stay with us. We'll be back in a moment for a more interesting conversation. Please stay tuned.
This is Let the Record Show.
This episode is brought to you by LinkedIn. Healthcare professionals can lead their careers with LinkedIn. Discover jobs by specialty, preferred shifts, and even desired salary. From mental health therapists to radiology technicians, it's now faster and easier for healthcare professionals to find the right fit. Learn more at linkedin.com/healthcare. Side effects may include faster job placement, improved work-life balance, and increased career satisfaction.
I already love same-day delivery with Shipt, but it's so much better since I signed up for Target's Circle 360. Why? Because I no longer pay price markups from the majority of stores through Shipt. Only a handful of alcohol retailers and items don't count. That means no markups on groceries, pet food, even home goods and makeup. So to recap, I have more time to catch up on life while someone shops for me, and I spend less. It's a win-win. Order now at shipt.com/360. Terms apply.
Morning decisions. A creamy mocha frappuccino drink? A sweet vanilla? Maybe a smooth caramel or that white chocolate mocha. Whichever you choose, delicious coffee awaits. Start your day with bottled Starbucks Frappuccino drinks. Pick up a bottle near you wherever you buy your groceries.
Home means something different to everyone. But with Rocket Mortgage, home can mean even more. It can mean a college education, taming your high-interest debt, even a renovation. We've made it easier than ever to use your home equity. That home you worked so hard for, now it can work hard for you. Call 800-4ROCKET or visit rocket.com to find out more.
Rocket Mortgage, LLC. Licensed in all 50 states. NMLSConsumerAccess.org. Number 3030.
This is Let the Record Show. Using common sense. Now, here are your hosts, Judge Richard Weinberg and Chairman Jesse Garcia.
We're back on Let the Record Show. I'm Judge Richard Weinberg. With me is Chairman Jesse Garcia, the Republican Party, noted attorney, commentator, and essayist, Eric Levin. Gentlemen, the growing threat of the axis of evil, it seems every day it becomes more dangerous. We've been talking amongst the three of us about this issue for a long time, and it never goes away. It only gets worse. I'm deeply troubled by China's moves. The Philippines is under siege now. You have the sea lanes under blockade by the Houthis, and of course the Houthis are just a puppet for Iran. You have Russia making its moves. I do not believe that Russia will be satisfied with a ceasefire unless it gets to gobble up a good portion of Ukraine, and after that they'll try to gobble up some other places like Moldavia, and who knows what's next with the Baltic states and Poland. This is very, very serious business. The Monroe Doctrine has been violated, has been breached. It's been ignored by the Biden administration, and you have a real presence both in Cuba, and you add to that Venezuela. You just had nuclear subs from Russia traveling around our coast and off of Cuba. You have armaments so advanced by China in terms of controlling space and the weaponry that can undermine our ability to keep satellites going. And Eric knows a good deal about this because he had the chairman of the House Intelligence Committee, Mike Turner.
That was more the anti-satellite nuclear weapons of the Russians.
Right. It's a very big,
it's a huge issue.
It's a huge issue, and Eric can talk about that. So we have a lot at stake. So why don't you begin this, Eric?
Sure. I mean, I think when we say the threat of the axis of evil, let's understand who they are. It's China, Russia, Iran, and North Korea. And you can just see it in front of our eyes as it all plays out. Iran sells cheap oil to China, notwithstanding that there are sanctions on those oil sales that the Biden administration is not enforcing. China that gets the windfall of the cheap oil and has promised to help Russia in its war against China and in its confrontation with the U.S. to undermine the American-led world order. Iran manufactures and sells drones to Russia so that they can then fight in Ukraine with those drones. Russia gives Iran political cover. North Korea sells missiles to Russia. We know that Putin has just left North Korea. They couldn't agree on a haircut, but they could agree that they would align themselves with one another in the event of aggression against one another. And North Korea, we believe, given the nature of Iran's nuclear program and the physical structures of their nuclear facilities, have North Korean technology in those facilities. So there is a clear operation together, and it's getting closer and closer every day between and among China, Russia, Iran, and North Korea. On this issue of the Russian anti-satellite nuclear weapons, Chairman Turner was talking about what is the risk. The United States, almost its entire military infrastructure is based in space. All the intelligence, all the data, all the communications runs through space. The Russians do not. They do not have that advanced technology. They are not as dependent on space as the United States is. But the Russians have developed, and the Biden administration has confirmed that they have developed the technology, but they will not release any additional information, notwithstanding Congress's request that he do it, that they are in the process of deploying these nuclear weapons in space, again, notwithstanding that there are treaties that ban it. And understand that if the Russians were to explode one of these nuclear devices in low Earth orbit, that they would destroy America's ability to communicate. It would wipe out our GPS. It would wipe out our military's ability to communicate around the globe. The Russians are not space-based. They are much more land-based, so that it would not impact them a whit. Well, I shouldn't say a whit, but it would not impact them nearly to the degree that would impact the United States. And we are doing nothing to either prevent the Russians from doing this or to have a fallback, a fail-safe position to ensure that America can still operate in the event that the Russians were to detonate such a device. It really just speaks to how incompetent, how weak this president is to allow nuclear weapons in space. It would be as if JFK allowed Russia to put nuclear weapons in Cuba. They couldn't. We forced them to take them out, and we should do similarly here. But this administration is so concerned about escalation, and that they've adopted the dual policy of appeasement and or surrender. So the other side sees this weakness, and they keep escalating, and they keep ratcheting up the pressure. And the more they ratchet up the pressure, the more this administration wants to defuse it. So the weaker we become, the more we appease. And we see that in Israel as well. It's exactly what's happening in Israel. The Israelis, the Biden administration is saying, we don't know what Netanyahu is talking about when he says there's an arms embargo. We've only picked one weapon system, this 2,000-pound bomb. Well, that's just simply not true. It's too clever by half. What the Biden administration has done is force the Israelis to get their weapons through the ordinary process. You got to get approval from State Department, from the Department of Defense, from intelligence, just during the ordinary course. And that just slows the process up. The president has the power, the legal power to say, skip this nonsense, send the weapons. But he's not doing that because he wants to restrain the Israelis from going into Rafah. He wants to restrain the Israelis from confronting Hezbollah in the north. But basically, this all speaks to this administration's fixation on de-escalation. And the only ones who de-escalate is Western civilization, while tyrannies around the world continue to escalate. And this anti-ballistic nuclear, this anti-satellite nuclear weapon of the Russians is a perfect example.
Jesse.
Yeah, I don't know how much more I could add because I completely agree with both you and Eric. But I think it's important to point out that this is a result of a vacuum of U.S. leadership on the global stage. It's indecision and mixed messages to our allies, which basically is telling our allies, the Biden administration is telling our allies that they can't count on America any longer. This issue as we go forward, and as we see these four nations come together and forming their new axis of evil, it reminds me of Mitch McConnell and his words from just a few years ago when the Republicans identified this as a growing problem. He said we need to stand up to the axis of evil, not try and do business with them. Those are very, very prophetic words, because right now, under the Biden administration, it's a policy of appeasement. It's a policy of taking a step back and letting bad actors fill that vacuum, fill that space that is becoming more and more.
That's what happens when America retreats.
Exactly. And that's to go to America cannot be an isolationist country again. It has too much at stake. It has too much interests abroad for us to become isolationists.
Well, world peace depends on the United States being able to project power around the world.
Listen, we could very well.
That's what we're seeing. What's going on right now? It's this axis of evil, whether China, Iran, North Korea, and Russia. They are demonstrating. I would add their partners in like Venezuela into this as well, as they're growing in influence and as partnership here. It's a slow show of force that they are demonstrating to the world. Yeah, don't compete against us, don't challenge us, or we're coming. And there's no one to stand shoulder to shoulder with our allies.
That's very well said. I agree with that. So let's focus a little bit more on. And there was a lead op-ed piece in today's Wall Street Journal in which the writer's premise was very simple. There's going to be a war between Israel and Iran. It's only a question of when it's going to happen and how it should happen. Should Israel move quicker and lose political, public relations support, or should it move now when it may be in a stronger military position? My own view, and it's a very pessimistic view, I believe that as long as the Ayatollahs control Iran, as long as we keep suffering the Obama, Kerry, Biden, Blinken delusion that we can buy them off and make nice and everything's going to be fine and we'll have more balance, as long as we suffer from those delusions and act in a weak way, you're increasing the likelihood of having a war between Iran and Israel, not lessening it. And I also believe that the point is very well taken, that Israel has to make the move when it's strongest and when it's in its best interest. And remember, the best interest of Western civilization and the United States and Europe and all the rest of the Middle East is in a strong Israel that can take out Iran or check Iran. Eric, your thoughts?
Yeah, so I think we're seeing this play out right now on the Lebanese border, Israel's northern border. I don't think there's any doubt that there's going to be a war in Lebanon. Let's remember who Hezbollah is. Unlike Hamas is a Sunni terrorist organization that is a proxy of Iran. Hezbollah is Shiite, like Iran, and it was founded by Iran. Hezbollah is Iran, and Hezbollah is now a terrorist organization with a state. Hezbollah runs Lebanon. It has government officials, and it runs and it owns Lebanon. In 2006, after an Israeli-Lebanese war, Israel-Hezbollah war, there was a UN resolution which required Hezbollah to withdraw all its forces north of the Litani River. It's a river in mid-Lebanon, just south of Beirut. So what did the United Nations do? They put in UNIFIL, the United Nations International Force in Lebanon. It was supposed to ensure that Hezbollah stayed north of the Litani River. Instead, what it did was act as a shield for Hezbollah against Israel as Hezbollah filled the south all the way down to Metula, Israel's northern border. So rather than acting as a buffer for Israel, it acted as a buffer for Hezbollah. So since the war in Gaza has kicked up, Hezbollah has been launching missiles and rockets into Israel. Now, keep in mind, Hezbollah is a battle-hardened, well-trained, well-armed organization, far superior to Hamas. They are the A team. Hamas is the B or C team. Hezbollah is the A team. So a war with Hezbollah is a war with Iran, and then but that is going to come. Now the question is whether it's going to be 1967 or 1973.
What does that mean?
What does that mean? In 1967, the Egyptians, the Syrians were preparing for war against the Israelis, and Israel preempted that war, and it was the 6-day war. So the Israelis attacked on their time frame, and they defeated Syria and Egypt in 6 days. In 73, there were indications that Syria and Egypt were going to attack again, but this time Israel waited, and they allowed Egypt and Syria to attack on their time frame, and Israel was almost destroyed. They ultimately won, but that was the Yom Kippur War for people who know it by that name. But Israel was almost completely destroyed. So the question is it going to be the 67 model when the Israelis are ready, or the 73 models when their enemies are ready? And also remember who Hezbollah is. We all remember that there were 242 Marines killed in Lebanon in the Marine barracks during the Reagan administration. That was Hezbollah. That was Iran. They murdered 240 plus Marines. That's who these people are. Now, the Hezbollah, as they've been launching these weapons into Israel, they've basically depopulated northern Israel. 80,000 Israelis have had to leave northern Israel. That's the equivalent to about 3.5 million Americans. What would be America's response if we had to depopulate the entire 3.5 million Americans from the Canadian border or 3.5 million Americans from the Mexican border? I don't think we would take too kindly to that. So in essence, what Hezbollah succeeded in doing to date is moving Israel's border south, making Israel smaller. That no state can sustain that. Hezbollah must be confronted, and it's going to be confronted. And if you see every day a new country is warning its citizens, leave Lebanon while you can, because there's going to be a war in Lebanon. The question is, how limited it will be? Because the Israelis this time, unlike in the past, they're going to have to go in with ground forces. They're not going to be able to just do it from the air. If they're going to clear out that territory up to the Litani River, it's going to require a commitment of ground forces. Then the question will be, will Iran commit? Will Iran commit? And if Iran commits, then we will have an incredible conflagration in the region. There's going to be a lot of death and destruction regardless, because the number of rockets and guided missiles that Hezbollah has dwarfs whatever Hamas has. It's going to be a bloodbath, unfortunately. But Israel has no choice. But all the more reason for Israel to do it on its time frame, not its enemy's time frame. But that's what we're in for.
All right. Last thoughts on this topic, Jesse, before we move on.
Just to build on what Eric said, I think the one thing that we need to watch out for, because this war is inevitable, is where is America going to stand?
Great question.
Excellent point.
Great question.
If a Biden administration is going to stand, are they going to stand on appeasement and indecision and make their inactions and doublespeak isolate Israel even further from her allies? Or is she going to be a full-throated? Are we going to be a full-throated ally, shoulder to shoulder with our friends in Israel, to make sure that all our allies, all of the Western civilization, is there to fight this battle?
Well, if past performance of any indication of future results, I am not hopeful.
I'm not hopeful. That's why this election is so critical.
That's exactly right.
Yep.
Listen, if you want World War III,
we're in it. We're in it.
No, yeah, well, that's a good point. But if you really want a hot World War III,
we're in it.
Israel,
Ukraine, we're in it.
Okay, a hotter World War III. Vote for Biden-Harris, because that's what you're going to get.
Yep,
it's inevitable. It's unfortunate. It's inevitable. Now let me shift gears, because I want to get your thoughts on this. And you'll say, why am I raising this issue now?
Why are you raising this issue now?
I'm glad you asked me that question.
Why are you raising this issue now?
I'm glad both of you asked it. I'm raising this issue now because there's a great correlation between the success of our economy and our ability to defend ourselves and our interests. And I'm talking about the crisis of America's debt, which has now hit $35 trillion, and some estimates say it will be as much as $50 trillion. Right now, paying the interest on the national debt, gentlemen, exceeds what we pay on national defense or for our entitlement programs. The number is staggering. And the more you have national debt and you have to sustain that, the more you have problems. And so I'm saying to you, this has got to be faced. Biden seems to think he can keep spending money. It doesn't make a difference. The answer is it does make a difference, because you can't deficit spend your way out of a bad economy. And if you don't have a strong economy, you don't have productivity, you don't have jobs, you don't have revenues, we're in serious, serious trouble. Eric.
Well, The sad truth is, I mean, look, 100%. I mean, the Biden administration and the progressive left, the idea of spending is it just can't do it anymore. Now, Republicans are in large part to blame too, not as much, but they have to shoulder some of the blame. But here's really where the crux of it is. Unless we get entitlements under control, Social Security, Medicaid and Medicare, none of the rest of it matters, because that's really what drives debts and deficits. And the unfortunate fact is both Biden and Trump have said they're not going to touch entitlements. And unless we reform those programs, it really doesn't matter what else we do. We're going to continue to have these debt problems, Richard, that you're concerned about.
Final word, Jesse.
Well, I think Donald Trump and the Republicans are right that those entitlements need to be protected and not adjusted. However, before we even get into that discussion, and it can never be one that we have to really address, there is a spending problem outside the federal government, outside that part of the federal budget that's important. You cannot have free, these free, paying for college tuition, incurring that debt on the American people unfairly and unconstitutionally. You can't give people everything for free. You cannot make this country a nanny state for each and every one of its citizens, because you're just buying votes. The Build Back America, we need to stop the Build Back America type of legislation that did nothing to
absolutely Margaret Thatcher,
and it has nothing to do with infrastructure.
Margaret Thatcher had this wonderful quote: "The problem with socialism is you eventually run out of other people's money," and that's where we are.
And that's where we are.
That's where we are.
And listen, you said it's a Republican problem and a Democrat problem, but here's the difference. Let me just go back to my favorite president that I kept referring to earlier in the show, Ronald Reagan. He ran as a deficit hawk. He also ran as a position that he had to build back the military because the Democrats had let it fall to a point where it was no longer sustainable to protect our country. So he had to. He
also reformed Social Security. He reformed Social Security.
Look, the problem is they often call Jesse and Eric Social Security is a third rail in American politics. The answer is there are ways of dealing with it without cutting the benefits for the people who are currently retired. You make them work a few more years in terms of getting the benefits, the full benefits. Well,
remember, the life expectancy when Social Security was put in place was something like 60 or below 60 years old. And you also had something like 15 payers, 15 workers to every retiree.
And what you'll have to do, by the way, is you got to get all these free riders, these border crashes, and we're taking our money and wasting our resources. We have to support them because we can't close. So I'm with Jesse. Before you take the third rail of American politics, close the border, stop letting people in for a free ride.
They're not mutually exclusive.
Okay, but let's take the first thing first. We don't need 10 to 12 million more people getting free lunches at our expense. This has been Let the Record Show with Chairman Jesse Garcia, distinguished attorney, commentator, and essayist Eric Levin. I'm Judge Richard Weinberg. Thank you for listening, and we look forward to being with you again next week.
Let the Record Show is on the air.